Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining me for today's episode in Caserta's Data Intelligence webinar series. I'm your host, Remy Rosenbaum, and today we're joined by Elation, the data catalog company, to explore the topic of data democratization. So for those of you who don't know, the goal of data democratization is to allow even non-specialists in your companies to self-serve, discover, understand, and analyze data without requiring any outside help. This is no small feat. And I think we can all agree that data is a really valuable business asset, but most organizations are still struggling to make data readily available for everyone across an organization where it can be leveraged to solve problems, make decisions, discover opportunities, and generate tangible business value. So as a result, the ultimate goals of data use, like increasing profitability and reducing costs, fall short. But now new technologies and methodologies have emerged that are making data democratization a reality. So today we're going to review the opportunities and challenges associated with data democratization, but also the methodologies and technologies that are required to have a real impact, like data governance, data cataloging, data virtualization, and data science desktops. We're also going to take a look at how leading organizations are successfully implementing data democratization. So for today's episode, I have put together two excellent presenters. First up, we have Caserta Principal Data and Analytics Strategy and Architecture, Doug Gray. Doug has more than 30 years of experience as a data and analytics practitioner, software product and solutions delivery program manager, and CTO VP director with Fortune 500 companies, including American Airlines, Sabre, Travelocity, and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Kansas City. Most recently, he was head of enterprise data and analytics at Southwest Airlines, where his team won a total of 7 industry awards. And if that's not enough, Doug is also an adjunct professor of business analytics at Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas. Next, for our partner relation, we have John Wills, Senior Director of Professional Services. John has more than 30 years of experience in data management and has held senior leadership roles in the fields of data warehousing, BI, data integration, metadata, governance, data profiling, and master data management. So just a little bit of housekeeping, and then we're going to jump right into it. Caserta's complimentary data and analytics webinar series is designed to give you insight into today's hottest technological trends and issues. After today's webinar, I encourage you to reach out to us with any questions about how to apply what you've learned today at your organization. Our initial consultations are always free, and if we find an opportunity to work together, then we'll discuss the next steps. And if not, we'll gladly point you in the right direction. After today's webinar, we'll send you a recording to the email address you provided. And if you have any questions throughout the presentation, I encourage you to enter them in the questions panel on the right, and I'll take care of them at the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So, Doug, I'm going to change it over to you.
Thank you, Remy. Good afternoon, everyone. To start with, I would just like to recognize the fact that the data mandate in enterprises today is more significant than it's ever been. So much so that an article in Forbes recently said that data and analytics in the enterprise isn't just a good idea, it's literally becoming the core of the enterprise. And for analysts working out there across the enterprise, literally at the edge of the enterprise, data democratization is important and critical so that you're not just another person with an opinion. As Dr. Deming said, who was the father of quality control and Lean Six Sigma. Companies like Amazon, led by Jeff Bezos, are using data and analytics throughout their organization to revolutionize retail. Amazon, for example, has over 1,000 data scientists in their supply chain organization alone that optimizes every aspect of merchandising, purchasing, inventory management, and distribution, all the way to the last mile. Amazon collects every piece of data that they can, even if they don't know what they're going to do with it, to be able to inform decision-making in the future. Leaders like Gary Loveman literally revolutionized the casino industry through a combination of data and analytics surrounding loyalty systems and engaging with the customer, investing over $100 million a year in that infrastructure. Loveman famously said, "Don't tell me what you think, tell me what the data says." And lastly, we find that many companies today are still run by what we call HIPPOs, the highest paid person's opinion. Ultimately, we would really like to have people with data and facts at their disposal making decisions and informing decisions rather than the HIPPOs. Let's briefly look at a definition of data democratization. Data democratization is really the ability for anyone in the enterprise, including the average end user, to be able to access information in a digital format. That could be analysts in any department, finance, accounting, HR. It could also be citizen data scientists or professional data scientists. Clearly, the goal of data democratization is to ensure that even non-specialists are able to gather and analyze information without needing any help from IT or a central data and analytics organization. Let's look at some of the opportunities and challenges associated with data democratization. First, the opportunities. My colleague, Doug Laney, recently published a book, my colleague at Caserta, that is, Doug Laney published a book called Infonomics, which is all about the science of monetizing information. Clearly, data has an opportunity to be monetized both inside and outside the enterprise. And this is clearly an opportunity for folks throughout the enterprise to gain business value and economic impact through data. The goal of data democratization is really to drive a new culture throughout the enterprise to become really fact-based and data-driven. And that gives you the ability to argue and make points and make cases for new business models, new projects, customer engagement. And this is really where data democratization can defeat the hippo culture within the enterprise. In my experience, I've seen that data, when coupled with analytics, can be very disruptive. But it's like creative destruction. But it's in a good way. That means that we can use data to invalidate outdated and long-held assumptions that, quite frankly, are often wrong if they're just based on gut instinct and experience as business models and external competitive factors change. Data exposes inconvenient truths to an organization. Maybe everyone really has a gut feel or an instinct that something needs to change or something is wrong, but data can actually bring that to light when coupled with models. And people at the edge of the enterprise need that as much as people at headquarters in central locations. Data oftentimes points out glaring inefficiencies in the business model. In the case of Amazon, they literally revolutionized retail by going and moving that model online and revolutionizing the delivery of products to people's homes instead of them going to a store. That was a lot of inefficiency that's been taken out of that retail supply chain using data. It can also help us uncover unforeseen opportunities. We may have a data set inside of our organization that's of great value to third parties and the results and the insights that come from that data. Lastly, I see data as really a catalyst for change. And we talk about digital transformation, and in my opinion, data and analytics is one of the fundamental elements of digital transformation. I have seen how, and examples that illustrated how data not only benefits departments and divisions, but entire companies to improve their economic performance. Out at the edge of the enterprise, whether you're in accounting or finance or HR, and you're an analyst in your organization, data gives you the ability to make better decisions, more efficient resource allocations, better use of limited resources. And this is really one of the key benefits of data. There's an opportunity to identify reduced costs and increased revenues that ultimately lead to increased in profitability. And finally, there's an opportunity to increase efficiency. That's that glaring inefficiency that I talked about earlier, where we may find, for example, that one supplier is much more efficient in their delivery and their lead time performance than another. And that might lead us to winnow down our suppliers to a smaller list of suppliers, making it more efficient and still delivering what we need. I've seen data improve customer engagement by looking at data and doing experiments like A/B testing on website performance to increase that funnel conversion rate. So again, there's opportunity to increase market share and even increase market cap and move the stock price of a company using data as an asset all the way through the enterprise. With those opportunities, there come challenges, and we have to be very pragmatic. There is nothing more important than securing our data and securing the access and controlling access of who has access to data. And I think that this is one of the things that will literally end up on the front page of the Wall Street Journal if you're not if your company's not careful with their data security. Many companies have challenges just their employees locating and finding the data that they need. They're not really sure what all data is available. Once I've found the data, I need to be able to access that data easily and extract it for analysis and interpret that data in the context of the problem that I'm working on. And contextually being able to use that data correctly so that I make the right decisions with the right assumptions. And this really requires us to document our data using tools like metadata and data catalogs to really understand what data is available, how do I access it, and how do I interpret it. Sometimes we see some adverse behaviors like data hoarding, where people have data either in spreadsheets or in access databases that they keep on their desktop, and they're not really sharing that data with other people and not really treating data as an enterprise asset. This is an ongoing challenge we see to better democratize data when it's locked up locally. From an enterprise perspective, there can also be localized data silos. We may have hundreds of applications, each of which has a database. There may be multiple data marts or multiple data warehouses throughout an organization that aren't always sharing and exchanging information and making that data accessible to folks out at the edge of the enterprise. There has to be a give and take with data. If you're going to take data out and you're going to analyze it, manipulate it, and come up with some conclusions, there ought to be a process by which you give data back to the organization. So data and analytics actually create more data that we want to be able to capture. Also, it's an offense in the data democratization world when we remove data without replacing it. We don't certainly want to be in a position where data is destroyed or lost, and this could be a challenge. And finally, we need to maintain that system of record and that source of truth integrity. We want to try and avoid as much as possible multiple copies of data throughout the enterprise. And my personal emphasis in the democratization of data is, as we have more analysts and we have more citizen data scientists, data literacy and understanding data and how to use it and analyze it, and numeracy, really being good with numbers, and statistical literacy, knowing the fundamentals of doing things like confidence intervals and hypothesis tests and design of experiments. These are very advanced skills that you usually acquire in a college program or through Coursera, but these are really typically critical skills that we need to have as we democratize data. The challenge being, if we don't have these skills, sometimes data can be used to deliver incorrect results, maybe from improperly designed experiments. So let's talk about a couple of really key enabling technologies that help deploy data democratization. So as a practicing data scientist historically throughout my career, I've found it useful both as a data scientist myself and also as a leader at major companies like Southwest Airlines. We had a great deal of success creating data science desktops that enabled self-service. And self-service, by definition, really is part and parcel to data democratization. We have several challenges when we democratize data. As a data scientist or an analyst, whether I'm a professional data scientist or citizen data scientist there on the right, I need to be able to wrangle data and integrate it to create data sets. I'd like to be able to visualize data, create scorecards or dashboards. I'd like to do descriptive and diagnostic analytics to tally up information, mean, mode, median, standard deviation, as well as use pattern recognition, correlation. And ultimately, as a professional data scientist, I'd like to do more advanced predictive analytics to predict outcomes or prescribe certain actions to optimize certain outcomes, like the operation of a supply chain. And ultimately, as I get more advanced in my data science and using data at the edge of the enterprise, I'd like to automate my machine learning activities to improve the efficiency of my relatively few and highly valuable data scientists. So this is a sample of a data science desktop that I've deployed in my past, specifically at Southwest Airlines. Alteryx for data wrangling, Tableau for data visualization, tools like Python and R for data wrangling and modeling, FICO Express optimization suite for prescriptive analytics. And lastly, for example, we look very closely at Data Robot. You know, we're technology agnostic at Alteryx, but we all have tools that we've worked with and experienced. And, you know, the data science desktop for me was part and parcel to enabling self-service and really fulfilling the promise of data democratization. This is a classical sample data democratization workflow where we have our data scientists and our analysts on the right. We have all of our source systems on the left, up there in the left-hand corner. Many companies may have, I've seen companies with 50 up to 500 different applications and source data systems. And we typically are moving that data from left to right into a data lake and then into a structured data warehouse. If we have a lot of data that sits in different systems like spreadsheets and Access databases, we can use data virtualization technology to make all of that data available to people at the edge of the enterprise. And then we have our data science desktop over there on the right, where we are consuming that data and using that data to solve problems at the departmental level, at the organizational level, as well as central at headquarters. So then we're doing quite a bit of very advanced modeling there, and then we're delivering ultimately back to the lower left-hand corner, we're delivering results and answers and conclusions, back to our executives and our decision makers and our stakeholders. So this is a very common workflow that we've used to deploy data out to the masses, literally hundreds or thousands of people out there in different departments at large companies. In my opinion, Elation really gives you the capability of unifying all of these elements of this data democratization workflow. And in a nutshell, the Elation data catalog connects to all of the data sources in your environment, making it easier for users to find and understand, trust, use, and then reuse those data assets. And as you can see here, Elation really provides an underlying fabric to enable data democratization, to enable the data science desktop, and help people find the information that they're looking for, properly access it, and contextualize that data in the context of the particular analyses that they're doing. Just to summarize, I've got a few key takeaways. So clearly we've seen that companies like American Airlines, Southwest Airlines, Amazon, also companies like casino hotels like Harrah's, they've demonstrated that there is this data mandate out there, that people at the edge of the enterprise are data driven, they want to solve problems, they want to add value to their company, economic value, business value, and data really is the driver. As the Forbes article said, data and analytics is becoming the core of the enterprise. With that, there are several opportunities with data democratization to increase value, to understand our customers' needs and act upon those and target the right customer with the right product at the right time and the right price. And using data to do that is instrumental to fulfilling that promise. There are also several challenges and caveats out there, like data security, not data hoarding, but taking data, giving data back, putting data back in the enterprise in a better state that we found it. And lastly, a key takeaway for me is the importance of tools like data catalogs to enable all of those other tools that I showed in that data science desktop and in that sample data democratization workflow. I hope that you've seen some value in these ideas and these concepts, and it will motivate you to take the next step and look into some of the references that I've mentioned and look into some opportunities for data democratization in your enterprise. Remy, I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks, Doug. Thank you for the presentation. That was excellent. Now we're going to turn it over to John Wills, who is the Senior Director of Professional Services at Elation. John, give me just one moment. And take it away.
Okay, thank you, Remy. Appreciate it. I appreciate all of you out there for the opportunity to speak to all of you. It's exciting to speak to so many people with an interest in the same topic. And thank you, Doug. That was an excellent foundation that you laid for me. I love some of those concepts of new culture, transformation, this concept of a fabric, data literacy, just to pull some of those really useful concepts that you laid out for us. What I'm going to do is really drill into that a little bit further into data catalogs. And I'm going to touch on two primary topics. I'm going to touch on the role of the catalog, and then I'm going to try to make it real and bring some customer stories forward and some common patterns and use cases, so you can all try to relate that to your organizations and what you're trying to achieve. So let's first start by talking about the role of the data catalog. And I think we need to just, start at the basics. And, what is the Alation data catalog, right? A simple question. The answer is it's really a living inventory of all your enterprise data assets. What does living inventory mean? It means it's enriched with business context. I'll talk a lot more about that in a few minutes. It's continuously evolving. It's not a one and done. It's constantly evolving, and it's being driven. That evolution is being driven by collaboration and sharing. It's enhanced by machine learning, and as Doug had said very articulately, it's empowering everyone to be able to find, understand, trust, use, and reuse data, and hopefully that'll become even more clear to you as I push forward. So, the problem that we see, and again, this is reinforcing some of the concepts that Doug laid out. The problem we see is that analysts, data scientists, people doing reporting are in a real pickle. They have this maze between them and this ever deepening, broadening volume of data, variety of data between them and the work they're trying to accomplish, right? So the enterprise data landscape, as we know, no one's ever going to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. It is what in the modern landscape, it is very, very complex. So what the catalog does is tries to bring clarity, meaning, and trust to what analysts, data scientists, and reporting people with reporting responsibilities are trying to accomplish. So the data catalog sits as a business application on the business side of the ledger. It allows people to do quick searches and understand the data, trust the data. Again, I'll drill into that a little bit more, what I mean by trust, and collaborate and contribute, right? So this isn't this brings elements of social collaboration and crowdsourcing into play in a way on the business side of the ledger that's really new in the data space, and it really makes and provides ownership to those analysts and those data scientists, so it really empowers them, right? So who builds the catalog, right? Another good question, basic question. It's really a combination. It's a man-machine combination. We let machines do what machines do best. That's crawl vast, massive volumes of data sources, do things like determine lexicon, usage patterns, and essentially give a really big productivity lift to what would be an impossible human manual task, right? Which is getting your arms around this ever increasing volume of data and variety of data. What people do is what people do best, right? We contribute and share expertise, our experience, observations, and we're constantly enriching what the machine populates into that catalog. So it's really a partnership. It's a combination of human crowdsourcing and machine automation that really give us the only fighting chance that I see in the industry. And like Remy said, 30 plus years. This is super exciting to me because I think it's the only thing I see gives us a fighting chance to scale with the volume explosion that we're seeing in data. So what's the fundamental benefit? So that's a little bit about what it is, who builds it. So what's the bottom line benefit? I think Doug mentioned it. He mentioned productivity in his presentation, and that really hits the nail on the head. If you look at what it takes an analyst today to find the right data, just try to understand it, and then check it, understand the definitions, how it relates to business metrics, and then figure out the mechanics, the technicalities of how to actually use the data, filters, joins, queries, all this stuff, takes a massive amount of time. It takes weeks to months in some cases. What the data catalog does is it accelerates that dramatically, and it reduces that, what could be weeks to months, to days and sometimes minutes, because you're able to search a very comprehensive catalog, find, understand, trust, use, and reuse the data, right? So I know that might not seem real to you yet, but I'm going to show you some examples that hopefully will bring that down to earth and make that a little bit real. So I have 3 examples, and I know for many of you, this will be the first time you've seen an Alation data catalog page. These pages are just packed with information, and you can You can do simple Google-like searches and find anything in the catalog that you want. It's full indexed and searchable, search index. The first thing I want to highlight amongst all this information on the catalog page is really what can be automated by the machine, right? So just as you would expect, we can crawl and pull in things like column names, data types, lengths, right? All the kind of stuff that's in your father's data dictionary, right? But the machine goes much further than that. It can do things like predict and automate the insertion of English human readable titles and descriptions on columns, fields, tables, schemas, right? BI reports, all these things that you're ingesting into the catalog environment. So it gives you that tremendous uplift in productivity by just automatically making things more understandable. And of course, you train the machine over time by telling it how correct it is, and it only gets better and better and better. It also includes things like sampling data for you and providing that sample data in a way that's also can be masked and protected when you need to do that. So it gives you context when you navigate to a piece of data that you're looking for, and gives you all this rich context that the machine has provided for you. So it's the automation is one thing I wanted to highlight. The next thing is the social aspect. I mentioned this before. There's lots of features packed into the catalog, like setting watches and driving and starting conversations and notifications. There's lots of social communication features. The ones I'll just point out very briefly are this concept of what we call endorsements. In some products, they're called sort of upvotes or downvotes. We've got the red, yellow, green stoplights. So as all the users, and I mean all the users, could be advanced, it could be basic users, are coming in and they're touching the data and they're using it and they're finding out things, they can make notations, green for good, and put some notes in, how the data help them, yellow for warning and what people should watch, red for maybe you shouldn't use this at all or we should deprecate it. So you're getting this real uplift in terms of the social commentary on the quality of the data. And this hits on, do the people you trust the data, right? Which tells you something really important about whether you want to use that data or not. And then of course you see the descriptive information there. So all users can participate by enhancing the descriptions, the titles, wrapped around the data itself, again, giving it that great business context. The third area I want to highlight is what we call behavioral insights. So behavioral insights go beyond just the machine ingesting data and then providing you, titles and descriptions, like I described just a minute ago. And it actually parses through all of the logs, the query logs. And by the way, it does this on a constant basis as part of the crawling mechanism. And behavioral insights then give you two really important things. Number one, it gives you the popularity of columns, fields, tables, schemas. And then secondly, it gives you the top users of those. And if you look, I know it may be a little hard to see, but on that right-hand column, you see the top users highlighted, and just below that, you'll see stewards. So we also have stewards assigned, not just the identification of top users. So what does that mean? Who cares? Well, popularity actually becomes really important if you have something like a 50,000 table data lake and you're trying to figure out where to start. And let's say that 1,000 of those 50,000 tables have some trace of customer name, customer address, and you're trying to figure out the best data to use. Well, a really important indicator is to look at the most popular tables that intersect with that customer data that you're looking for, right? So it becomes a really powerful fact that leads you much, much quicker to high quality, trusted data that you might want to use. So why does it matter top users? Well, as I explained in the productivity example, most of us spend a lot of time looking for the expert and then wanting to ask the expert questions. The catalog tells you who the expert is. This is the top user of this data. You can simply right-click on their name, start a conversation right in the catalog environment, and you're having a direct dialogue about this data. right? So it's super powerful, high productivity capability that basically the machine is handing you by doing this crawling and providing these two types of behavioral insights. So those are three really quick views or dimensions on the data catalog. I'm going to switch gears a little bit here, and I'm going to move to that second section that I called sort of making it real. What I'd like to do is to share some usage patterns that we see in our customer base, and I'd like to also then go a little deeper into three stories from three specific customers that I think you'll recognize the names of, right? So I'll go into those after the usage patterns. So we have over 130 Fortune 2000 customers using the catalog across thousands of users, across millions and millions of ingested and crawled attributes and data sources in their environments. What we've seen through all that usage, all those implementations and all that success, are some patterns emerge at common ways that people use the catalog. So I'd like to just share those with you. The six that I want to share are, really listed on the left-hand side. And I'm not going to drain the swamp and sort of read this slide to you because I have an illustration of each of the six on subsequent slides. So I just invite you to read this once you have the follow-up material. It can take some more time. So let's walk through these six. First of all, new employees can browse interrelated topics. In fact, any employee, anyone can. It doesn't have to be an analyst or just a business user, but anyone. So first of all, it's great for onboarding, but it's great for anyone. Why is that? That's because the catalog isn't only about ingesting data sources, it also is about ingesting BI reports, and it's about articulating and having business metrics, business terms, and any other type of object in the catalog and then cross-associate it. So if I'm a user and I understand this part of the organization I'm in and a metric that's used, I can use that as my starting point. I can traverse over to the reports which surface and use the metric. I can then traverse to the data source and the components that make up that report or make up that metric. If I'm someone else who understands the data better and I want to start at the data source and then traverse over to the supporting business terms or the metrics or report, I can go in any direction. So it's a network of information. It's super powerful for a broad array of users. And so that's one of the patterns of use that we see within our customers. The second I've already mentioned before, but I'll just go over it again because this kind of visualizes it. Users can quickly find the best people to ask for help. So when you ingest the data source, and now from my previous discussion, we automatically figure out the top users. We also have that steward assigned, and we also have top users or the experts who are contributing queries. More on that in just a moment. But just by quickly doing a Google-like search and getting to the data, I instantly know who I can start a dialogue and conversation with. It's super powerful. You can also tag yourself, and other experts and other users tag themselves with their key areas of expertise. And that's another way you can look for kind of birds of a feather or communities, right, that you want to be a part of to sort of participate and talk about a certain domain of data or a certain topic. The third usage pattern is really going back to the topic of trust and just visualizing it and thinking about it for a moment. You have all of these, you have the crowd on the right-hand side, whether that's experts, users, stewards, all the above. They're all searching for data, using data on a constant basis. They're having conversations about it. They're giving feedback in the catalog about it. They're flagging things through those endorsement, that red, yellow, green indicator I was talking about. All of those things aggregated together give you a super strong sense of trust, and whether you can trust specific types of data you're finding and which pieces of it you want to use, right? So that's very commonly used. Here's a twist or a nuance on what I already described before, and that's users can find and reuse expert queries. So I talked about being able to find the expert, and what happens a lot today without the catalog is you You send a lot of emails, you make a lot of phone calls, you hope somebody's not on vacation, you find the expert finally, and then you want to ask them a bunch of questions about how to get to the data, what's the right data, how to use the data, how to, specific joins maybe to pull the data together. Now the catalog eliminates all that because the expert gets to contribute their knowledge and publish it into the catalog. So now it's fully searchable, fully leverageable, and reusable. So Doug used the term data literacy, and I love that term because this is the concept of by experts contributing, it's kind of that a rising tide lifts all ships. You're raising the knowledge level and the literacy of your entire user population and making the work of the expert and the user more effective and more productive. All right, the fifth usage pattern really ties into system migration. So we've seen that our customers get a lot of value out of cataloging the old source, cataloging the new source, and interrelating the common business metrics, terms, reports, and so forth that remain constant as they make a shift from old system to new system. That could be warehouse to lake, that could be ERP system, old to new, whatever it may be. The catalog gives a sense of stability and a foundation for communicating to users what's happening and how the data is linked and tied in to that key business terms, metrics, and reports, especially on these projects that are complex and they take multiple phases and you have both old and new running in parallel for quite some time. So we've seen that be quite useful. And then the last of the six is that users can actively participate to enrich content. So I've kind of sort of hit on that topic a few times, but the crowd is constantly participating through their dialogue, their flags, their feedback. And so it's an uplift. Used to be in the old days, the steward was the control point and everything went through the steward and everything had to be published, the content published, curated, approved, and then pushed out by the steward. And that model has just been proven that it won't work. It's too skinny of a pipe. You can't get the volume of data going through a modern enterprise at the rate that you need. So the crowd, much like Wikipedia, the crowd is the right way to go to be able to scale. All right, so we touched on several usage patterns. I want to dive into very briefly 3 different customer examples. I kind of stole my own thunder and jumped ahead. So you see the first one I'm going to touch on as a little company you might be aware of called Pfizer. I say that tongue in cheek. They're obviously one of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies, been around for 170 years. The pattern I'm going to go through is for each of these 3, I'm sort of going to try to explain the challenges they were faced with, the solution, and then a little bit about the results that they got out of it. So they're so old and they're so large, they have tremendous latent potential for using data, for their operational effect, their commercial and scientific, from a scientific standpoint. But they were really in a situation where they have such a vast global network. It was so highly decentralized. It was a challenge for data users to actually find data sets, to understand them. So they had sort of an opaque lack of transparency. And they actually found they had many duplicate analytic efforts underway. So they set out on this goal to try to, just simply allow the business to be able to answer questions with data and have access to this vast expertise, kind of unlock that latent potential. So what they did, and this kind of goes back to Doug's comment about data science desktop, they didn't call the data science desktop, but they put together what they call the virtual analytic workbench. Their virtual analytic workbench was released globally. Elation was the center point of it. It included some of those other technologies and tools that Doug had on his slides. And by the way, that's a very common use case for us, is that we're part of an analytic platform that includes a collection of tools, including data wrangling and analytic tools and so forth. Because you can imagine with us, with you finding the data so quickly and then transitioning those tools, you have this productivity pipeline that just moves very, very efficiently and quickly. So they created this platform. They released it globally. It's what they've seen so far is it's it's given them massive enhancement in organizational speed and agility. They're able to solve complex problems much faster. They're more aware of what different parts of the organization are working on. One thing they cited was the ability to, as an example, to improve pediatric adherence to a course of vaccinations through a rapid mining, a data mining project that they put in place. They had another example where they had an AI study where they're surfacing predictors that could help accelerate the diagnosis and the treatment of fatal conditions, right? So there's all kinds of examples of projects they were able to move more quickly because they put this analytic platform in place. So that's a little bit about Pfizer. Really exciting customers. They've done really exciting and dynamic things with the platform. The next one I'd like to talk about is American Family Insurance. Again, I'm sure many of you have heard of them. They're a venerable company, been around for many years. 13th largest property and casualty company, 306 I think on the Fortune 500. They're a private mutual company, so they do commercial and personal lines of insurance. This is a little bit of a different story. It's a little bit of a transformational story. So again, Doug, hearkening back to thing that he mentioned about transformation, this is a transformational story. Their CTO, Peter Settle, really laid out a vision and a course to move to being all in the cloud. And his rallying cry was no legacy systems, no legacy mindset. So he's really trying to change to a data culture, raise the level of literacy across the entire organization. And I'm just going to quote him here. He says he wants an environment where business experts like adjusters, underwriters, first line managers, notice they're all business people, are able to access the data they need and make data-driven decisions with a full understanding of how to apply the data to their areas of expertise. So a big vision, a big challenge. And just like I'm sure many of you and many of our customers, they've tried this before, right? This isn't the first time. So they had a previous attempt where they had put a metadata repository together. They pumped into it over 16 million different cataloged data assets that included data models, ETL mappings, and more. And it didn't work. They built it, and well, the end of that story. People did not come, right? So they had a ratio of technical users to business users, which was way out of whack. They had about 5 technical users for every business user. They still had an explosion of a number of data silos where they had over 650 distinct web pages, SharePoint document stores, shared drives. The story goes on and on. We all know the story. Many of us, unfortunately, have lived it. So they had a previous attempt. With the catalog, they were reaching for the social transformational aspect to bring and make it a collaborative effort amongst the business side of the organization. So they adopted the data catalog, focusing on delivering high quality data with rich business metadata. And so it's been super successful. They have about 1,000 users to date. They're aiming to do a full coverage of their employee population, 12,000 employees. They have over 70 data sources already cataloged that include BI servers, file storage services, obviously relational databases, some non-relational, and it really is helping them move to this state of data literacy across the business users, and they're seeing really high levels of participation. So it's helping achieve that vision of no legacy thinking. All right, the third example that I'll just talk about for a moment, and I'll turn it back over to Remy for us to go into some Q&A, is Hilton. Again, well-known company to all of us, 100 years old, 15 plus brands, 5,000 plus hotels. They kind of had more of what I would call a classic, not necessarily transformational, although there's some transformational elements. They just had a classic case where they had silos in their analytic and data group throughout the business, right? So they had data and analytic groups, but they were very siloed, and they felt limited in their ability to use data and analytics in order to innovate. And they want to innovate in especially two areas. Obviously, travel and hospitality related, that is their business after all, but probably more importantly, personalizing the guest experience. And so they didn't feel like they were fully realizing their ability to apply analytics to that. So they wanted to be able to connect everyone with the right data when they needed it, which was, perfect for us because that's right in our wheelhouse. So what they did was they walked away from their traditional warehouses, the silos in analytics, deeply embedded IT structures, and they did what their CIO called, let's reimagine analytics. They spun up a new data and analytics group in their commercial services group. They started overhauling their talent, some of their process. They moved to a data lake environment. They put us on top of it, Alation on top of it, as a way to help people discover data with context. And I think this is one of the keys for me in this story. They wanted that business context. And I showed that diagram of that interrelated network of objects you can sort of surf through. And that's exactly what they did. So they wanted a centralized point for providing this business context combined with the data, so all their users could have access to it and share knowledge. So they've cataloged their data, as well as now several different types of business glossaries, business terms. They've moved away from the PDFs, the Excel sheets, and they're able to make key decisions using metrics and definitions and all the classifications that are in the catalog as a way to help them move forward. They also cite that they call it a connected glossary. That's just kind of a term they use, and I love that term because it kind of gives I think the right emphasis to the fact that it's a glossary for the business users, but it's connected because it's connected to the data. They also found a lot of great value in the machine learning uplift and productivity. They cited 60+% of when they ingested data that the titles, the English readable, human readable titles that were automatically labeled, gave them a huge just instant boost in understanding and productivity. So that's a little bit on Hilton as well. I hope you all found those little vignettes, those little stories useful. I think each of those customers has kind of left us with some practical advice. I think American Family Insurance has moved from a culture of reporting to a culture of analysis. Pfizer is select tooling that lowers the barrier to collaboration and curiosity. And Hilton is track the business impact of your data initiatives, and for them that's personalizing the user experience. Overall, make data thinking become business thinking. So they have all been presenters at our Alation Revelation events where customers speak to other customers, and this is some of the sage advice that they offered in those sessions. So I'm going to wrap it up there. Again, I appreciate everyone's attention and listening and the opportunity to speak to you. There's always more information that you can find at Alation. And I thank you for your attention. And Remy, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right. Thank you, John. The presentation of real-world examples were very insightful. We're now going to go into the Q&A section. Again, everyone, please enter your questions into the GoToWebinar panel on the right. So let's kick it off with the first question. In your experience, what is the biggest value and biggest risk with data democratization? And can you give an example? Doug, you want to take that one?
Sure. So I was very fortunate to have a lot of enterprise support. When I worked at Southwest Airlines for rolling out self-service, and one of the best examples that I saw of data democratization was that using that data science desktop, our internal tax organization was able to eliminate thousands of hours of internal inefficient labor and auditor hours to roll up and be able to automate the filing of all of our taxes at a state, local, county, municipal level, and everywhere that the airline flew. And that was a great example of internal efficiency improvement. by putting the data in the hands of the people that actually needed it instead of having to rely on IT. And that was an efficiency improvement. In terms of the greatest value in general, I see in, as companies like Amazon have done, literally revolutionizing a business model, literally turning the retail model on its head and taking out cost. And not only taking out cost, but Amazon, for example, their business model couldn't even exist without the thousands of data scientists they have, not only in their supply chain organization, but across their entire enterprise. They've got literally thousands of people across the Amazon enterprise, using data. So in my experience, putting data and a data science desktop along with tools like Elation in the hands of people that need it at the edge of the enterprise, those are just, that's where the real value, economic value, business value, streamlining, automating, optimizing through analytics and data, business processes that really hit on major enterprise KPIs. And in terms of the greatest risk, I think we would all agree, and I put this at the top of my list, is data security. And this has never happened to me personally or any company that I've worked for, but I think we've all seen the story on the front page of the Wall Street Journal where an employee has downloaded lots of sensitive data onto their laptop, and in the worst possible outcome, they lose that laptop or it's stolen, and then that data is accessed by potentially nefarious parties for less than desirable uses and circumstances. And securing data, controlling access to data, if not done properly, will result in the greatest risk associated with data democratization, in my opinion.
All right, thank you, Doug. So our next question is, and this one is going to be for John, most large enterprises who implement data catalog solutions will have one or more ERP, CRM packages from vendors such as SAP and Oracle. How do customers provision business metadata from these packages into Elation quickly and easily?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a whole variety of what we call connectors, right, that connect to third-party data sources. So we would have to look at the specific packages and look to see, is there a connector that's there out of the box. If there's no connector out of the box, you're not out of luck. We have partners who provide third-party connectors as well, so there's a rich marketplace there. And we always have APIs, right, which are really easy to consume, REST APIs, which could be used as well. But 99.9% of the time, there's commercially available connectors either out of the box from us or third parties. So that's the mechanics of getting to the data. Fortunately, it gets easier and easier as the years go by, and I think as we've had this explosion of different technologies, and really in my career coming to the forefront of an emphasis on the ability to connect different technologies, right? It's getting easier and easier all the time. So I hope that answered the question.
All right, thank you. Our next question is, organizations have many different types of databases and ETL tools. Can you capture the metadata from the various databases, stored procedures, and ETL tools, such as Informatics, Clutter, Navigator, etc.? I think that's referring to Elation.
Yeah, again, a really good question. I think that the short answer is yes, it can be done. I think one of the questions and sort of points of validation we try to walk through with customers is to make sure that's really what they want to do. If it is really what they want to do, and I'll talk more about that just in a moment, then as I said, yes, it can be done. We have several different examples, and we'll be happy to show you how we've ingested metadata from many of the most popular ETL tools and integration platforms that are out there. So the reason I said we try to make sure that that's what people really want to be done is that, as you heard in my presentation, we really view the catalog as a business asset, as a business application, And so we want to emphasize business participation and their ability to find the data that they need. So sometimes, not all times, I get there's legitimate reasons when you want to pull that stuff in for the business, but sometimes there's an overemphasis on the technical metadata. And let's get information in about the landing tables, the staging tables, the transformations. And sometimes if you're Joe in accounting and you're just trying to find the right metric in the calculation, that's not terribly useful. So again, not saying it's not for every organization, but we do try to have a conversation with our customers about that, what they're trying to achieve. And if it's what they want to do, then as I've described already, it's entirely doable.
Okay, great. Thank you. Our next question. How do you build a case for a data catalog? And it's hard to measure the pain of not having it to begin with, although your gut says we need it. And secondly, how do you accurately measure the impact of getting a data catalog? That's another one for John, but Doug, do you want to take a crack at it first?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, our colleague at Caserta, Doug Laney, wrote a book called Infonomics, which is all about data monetization and how do you extract business value from data and economic impact. And I think the case for any type of platform or tool can be justified by the value that you're expecting to get out of it. And there's a couple ways to do that. I mean, if you were just to do a study, for 3 or 6 months and look at how much time your folks in your company that are trying to do analysis spend looking for data, interpreting and wrestling and integrating and wrangling data, I think the time that those people spend alone, that's absolutely wasted. It creates such an inefficiency and a waste of resources. That there's one way, just the efficiency and the impact of your people's time. But probably the bigger multiplier is, you take one of your top 2 or 3 cost or revenue drivers in your company's strategy. In the airline business, our top 2 costs are crew and fuel. If you look at the fact that those 2 costs combined make up a very significant percentage of all the revenue that company generates, then the question is, how could we get out of a data catalog which organizes the data about those 2 KPIs? What's the potential value? I think if you could just improve your cost profile 1%, you're talking tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars potentially that would generate the benefit from having a catalog. And it's like that old saw that if you think training is expensive, try ignorance. If you think it's expensive to buy any of these platforms, including data catalog, try living without them. And the comparison, when you put it in those terms, I think it makes the case itself.
All right, Doug, thank you so much. That's all the time we have today. Anyone who asked a question that was not answered in the live Q&A, we will contact you with an email response. And if you do have a question that you didn't get a chance to ask, please contact me. I will be sending you a follow-up email after this. Feel free to respond. To our presenters, thank you very much for an excellent webinar. And thank you all our attendees for coming. And we'll send you a recording shortly. Take care.